How about this? I had the settings backwards for audio input and audio output. So, just to repeat what I had just said and nobody was able to hear, God, I'm gobsmacked too to see that there are two people there before I even get started. Good to see you both. How you doing, Mask and Adam? And we're just going to get started with some Geoguessr as per usual while I drink tea and try to wake myself up a little bit. Ingang om de hoek. That is Dutch. Entrance around the corner. Profijtmeubel. Woonman bij de wonen. Okay, we are either... Okay, let's see these number plates. Let's see what color those are. Yellow, we are in the Netherlands. It's a tiring era. It's a tiring fucking decade. Aanhuis.nl. Yep, we're in the Netherlands. It's some sort of trading estate. Wethouder van Ierlandstraat. Okay. Mascota. Did you hear that whole thing where Joe Biden was going to appoint a right-wing pro-forced birth asshole to a federal judgeship in Kentucky's apparently fallen through for the moment? Not apparently because fucking Joe Biden decided to do the right thing, but because apparently Rand Paul didn't like this judge or something. Hertogbos, Tilburg Oost, Goedele. Okay. Nederland. Okay, Goedele. Goedele. And it's someplace near Hertogbos and Eindhoven. Kroonvoort, Droene, Hegel, Os, Wittehoef, Nieuwland, Warmberg. Fokkershoek. I would love to have an address in Fokkershoek. Lo, Kantje, Kerkdriel. Okay. Tilburg, Oost, Breda. Well, there's Breda, there's Tilburg. So it's got to be around here someplace. Yeah, Rand Paul. Fuck knows. I mean, maybe the guy wouldn't wear his clan hood for him or something like that. I mean, fuck knows what Rand Paul wants in a fucking judge. I don't think I actually care to find out. Oosterhout, Valvik, Nieuwkijk. Come on, it's gotta be around here someplace. Loopkant, Volkel. Dieskant. De Donk. Dieskant, literally just this size. I'm gonna say it's someplace around Hertogbos. And have done with 18 kilometers. Oh, it was on the outskirts of Tilburg. I had... Okay, there's a rail strike, or was going to be a rail strike? Oh, I totally missed this. I have not seen anything about it. Yeah, tell me more. Okay, so the Brotherhood of Locomotive Engineers and Trainmen authorized a strike effective Monday nationwide. And there's an emergency mediation committee to try to prevent it, of course. Because Joe Biden never met a union he didn't want to fuck over. Yeah, well, I mean, all U.S. labor laws are just full of all sorts of bullshit to stall things and break strikes. I mean, there aren't a lot of countries that ban as much union activity as the U.S. does. At least, I mean, you can get to them, but it turns out that their president is wearing a uniform. And, like, when we say the Railway Labor Act is really bad, are we talking as bad or worse than, say, Taft-Hartley? Okay, looks like we are in someplace Spanish-speaking, probably in South America. La Violeta. Okay, green signs. Green signs could be Chile, but it could be a lot of things. Yeah, okay, definitely Spanish. Vivero Corona de Cristo. A ver. Well, if it's Chile, we will know in quick time because we will see a little restaurant-y, dinery type thing, and it will say, Fested? There's a fucking construction material company called Fester. Oh, Jesus. Well, that sucks. It would be nice if we got a little bit more of that wildcat action we were having with education workers in Oklahoma and West Virginia a couple of years ago. That was the energy we need. Camaleon. Okay, none of this tells me anything specific about the country. I've never heard of any of these fucking brands. Ascro. When you like big butts and cannot lie. I'm gonna try going in the other direction, going towards La Violeta. Because that seems like more likely to find a town center, and then we would have some of the telltale signs of what country we're in. Other than construction materials, which I don't know shit about. What kind of white pride ass name is what? La Violeta? Fested? A ver. Fernando Guzmán. Pan. Estamos en México. Okay, that's what I needed. We're in some place in Mexico, near a place called La Violeta, and there was a gubernatorial candidate for the state by the name of Fernando Guzmán. I do not know apart from being able to name a few historical presidents and major political parties, I don't really know a whole lot about Mexican politicians, so beyond the fact that that's that we are in Mexico, the name Fernando Guzman does not really help me. Tolteca, extra forrajería, lo gigante. 391 area code. Hey Andromeda, good to see you. How you doing? We are someplace in Mexico near a town called La Violeta, and we know very little else about it except that it's pretty rural. Oh, this t-shirt is a trophy. Thank you, by the way. This t-shirt, it has a lot of personal significance because I acquired it La Violeta, San Vicente, El Salto de Don Irineo. Okay, La Violeta and San Vicente say nothing to me. A million other places, a million countries have towns by those names. And El Salto de Don Irineo, the place where apparently a guy by the name of Irineo jumped. That doesn't really help me much. See, the first time I got tear gassed and had to escape the Chilean military police with several tens of thousands of comrades behind extremely strategically placed barricades. After we finally got back to sort of the safe zone, which is the main building of the Universidad de Chile in San Francisco, Loma de Piedra. There was a guy selling these t-shirts. Que se vayan todo. And it's the map of, this is Chile, but covered in blood. And it's basically the entire political class can fuck off. And that was a hell of a night. We were on the street, calle 4 de Octubre. We were on the street, it was a huge protest, like 150,000 people total, in 2015 against the repression by the military police, and in honor of a student by the name of Rodrigo Avilés, who had nearly been killed by a military police water cannon a few days before, and at the time was in an artificial coma because it fucking wrecked his skull. And I'd never actually been in an atmosphere quite like it. I mean, they do marches really well in Chile, I have to say. And for one thing, okay, let's see, shoes, Lizzie, Becky, makeover and cosmetic store. Okay, looks like we are, I'm going to say possibly Nigeria, Ghana, West Africa, definitely. I mean, it just, so this shirt is sort of a memento of that night. I'm gonna say we're in Ghana, although we could just as well be in Nigeria. I haven't seen anything that tells me for sure. Although I think there's marginally more Ghana than Nigeria. And we're in Nigeria. 3554 points though, not too bad. Okay, we are back in Spanish-speaking world. Senado de la República, Senate of the Republic. So we're definitely not in Spain. Escol Instituto Social de Capitación Colombia. Okay, the Colombian Senate Administration Building. So we're in Bogota. Just making sure that Restream doesn't back up on me. A ver. Barrios Unidos, Casa Hostal. Engativá, Bella Vista Occidental. Parque de los Hippies. Hippie Park. La Porciúncula. Centro Comercial Andino, Chico Reservado. Police Religious Center. There's a motel called Temptation. Okay. Ein Schelm, wer Böses dabei denkt. Senado de la República, ¿dónde carajo está? Fiscalía General de la Nación. Secretaría Distrital de Salud, no me sirve de nada. Really do not know much about the layout of Bogota. Only part of Colombia I've really seen anything of is the area around Medellin. Ah, okay. Not bad, 49.60. And 5 of 5, this looks like North America. Looks foggy as fuck. Oh, well, not anymore. The weather has changed. Loma Negra, Hormigonera, Suma Proyecto. Okay, we are still... We've been almost exclusively in Spanish-speaking countries this time. Santa Teresita. Okay. Centro de Monitoreo, Aubasa. Okay, come on, gonna have something useful coming up, I'm sure. This is a major road. Centro Hierro, frutas, verdura, Pare. Okay, we're in South America. And there's a water park nearby called Poseidon. Yeah, you can tell you're in South America and not Europe or Central America because the stop signs say Pare. In Central America they say Alto, and in Europe they say Stop. Mar de Ajo, Sea of Garlic. Sounds nice. I could go for that. I love garlic. Building materials. Wherever we go, there are... Okay. You know, last week we were watching Caleb Maupin explain how communists ought to respond to the overturning of Roe v. Wade. And we had gotten 14 minutes into it, and we still hadn't gotten to the part where he suggests that anything should actually be done. And there's still quite a bit left. So, okay, we're not in Chile. We can say that because they don't call their cops policía. Apart from PDI, Policía de Investigaciones. But that is just, on signs that would be PDI Mar del Tuyo. Okay, that sounds Quechua. La Tonina. Okay, we could be in Peru, maybe. So we could return to that, but I've also got some other bullshit to look at. Well, they got two kinds of cops. There's the military police. They're like literally, it's not a militarized police force like we have here, for example. It's literally an army unit that since the late 19th century is also responsible for just sort of killing Chilean civilians. And they're called Carabineros de Chile. They're literally named after a carbine, after a rifle. So Carabineros, well, it's funny you should ask, because there's also Gendarmería de Chile. And Gendarmería de Chile is screws, prison guards, COs. So, and colloquially, Carabineros de Chile are known as Paco, or more commonly than not, Paco Culiao, which means fucking cops. And then there is a plainclothes civilian police force that is basically like the FBI. They just do criminal investigations. And they are the Policía de Investigaciones, PDI, and they, along with the like spy service, domestic intelligence, are called Lorrati or Tira. So if you see Policía, just Policía, you are not in Chile. You are anywhere else potentially. Iglesia del Centro. It's a centrist church. They're into Jesus, but they're willing to have their mind changed, I guess, or something. What do they do, huh? Okay. Mar del Tuyo. Okay, we're not in Chile. We could be in Peru. Tuyo sounds... We could be in Ecuador. We've gotten Ecuador quite a lot lately. La Plata, Las Toninas, Pipina. Well, La Plata can also potentially be Argentina. Although Tuyo does not feel Argentina. That feels very Andean. Quechua. But it's not impossible. I mean... So, oh, yeah. Okay. We're just gonna say Argentina. I mean, the infrastructure is in reasonably good shape, which also kind of makes me think Southern Cone. 43-39 points nonetheless. 21,079. Not too bad. I'm contemplating throwing in a game of chess. Why not? Or, though we've also got, let me just show you what all we've got here. We've got Caleb. Oh, I forgot. We've got some really nice. We got some bespoke bullshit. Okay, as I said, Supreme Court rules on abortion. How do communists respond? The opposite of however Caleb Maupin and his mob respond, I would say. But I'm willing to hear what he has to say. So socialists support the Dutch landowners. I mean, farmers. It's like literally, it's the people who employ farmers. But of course, I mean, he liked the trucker convoy that didn't include many real truckers in it at all, and was organized by known neo-Nazis, and he thought that the left should support that, so not surprised. Revolutionary art, how does it make you feel? V for Vendetta versus Wind That Shakes the Barley. He's going back into film. He's going to misunderstand some movies for us. Oh, but yes, I'm kind of that's the direction I'm leaning in. But let me just suggest, Jason Unruhe doesn't understand degrowth but supports it. In which Maoism's own Ed Grimley imitator squares off with Caleb Muppet. And out of the movement to the masses, where did our organization came from? Well, I can answer that question fairly quickly. It came from RT America shutting down and Caleb Maupin needing something else to do with himself. But we're actually pretty early, so we might be able to get more than one of these things in here. Oh, and there's Dracula, a Marxist understanding. Oh, I mean, there's all sorts of bullshit. But yeah, let's see what he has. Let's do the Supreme Court rules on abortion. We'll give him a little while to see if he ever gets to the fucking point.
United States, right? They're not going to end.
Previously on, Caleb Muppet lectures a bunch of unenthusiastic people in Kansas.
Free college for all. The reason that the Democrats are not fighting for these things they claim to believe in.
Oh, fuck 'em. I did not, I forgot to hit ad blocker.
United States, right? They're not going to end the wars for these folks. They're not going to implement a totally free market libertarian economy and let things completely crash. But this is something that they can give implementer of the United States. The way they got what they wanted was by becoming a threat to the power structure, making real demands.
Oh, yes, that's right. He thinks that the Republican Party became a threat to the power structure by basically taking over everything. I mean, I would have thought that they were part of the fucking power structure, but we have to remember Caleb Muppet's whole thing is that actually fascists are the fight back against the hegemonic order. That they are the plucky they are the plucky underdogs with, that is like the underlying, that is the idea that is central to his shitfest bread tube serves imperialism. That the far right are the underdogs.
And I actually predicted this. It's not a great moment to go, I told you so, but 3 or 4 years ago I predicted that Roe versus Wade was going to be overturned.
Wow, yeah, that's right. He predicted something that has only been fucking obvious since about 1980. By having been a key component of that power structure to begin with. Yeah, I mean, a movement that is, like, funded by oil billionaires. See, I think that they probably already were, they started out kind of embedded within that power structure. It's been a long game that they're playing.
And I said, why? The reason that I said Roe versus Wade was going to be overturned was because this is a victory that can be given to the Trump base, to middle America, without ultimately...
Oh, yeah, I see what he did there. He equated, I didn't notice this the last time, I moved it back a little bit, so we're looking at stuff from last time. He equates middle America, which is just such a fucking meaningless term already, unless we're, I mean, if we're being geographic about it, no, it's not the Trump base. If we're being, in the political sense, like the middle of the road, the people who represent, you know, majority opinion, then no, it fucking isn't. Oh, I have a feeling that it is going to... It's the worst, most superficial analysis so far.
Changing the structure of the United States, right? They're not going to end the wars for these folks. They're not going to implement a totally free market libertarian economy and let things completely crash. But this is something that they can give to red states, to Alabama, to Kentucky, to Tennessee, to to conservative states. This is something they can give.
Okay, this is, I mean, he keeps on talking about like he's providing this deep analysis, and this is just literally the level of analysis you get on fucking MSNBC. The idea that if you paint a state a certain color on the map, that means everybody in there definitely wants things to be as right-wing as possible, when the reality is that wherever you go in this country, the Republicans generally win because people abstain. And people abstain, I mean, we have studies that, like the Vanishing Voter Project, that show this. That have just done the extraordinary thing of just asking people why they don't bother to vote. This 1/3 of the population who can reliably be counted on to abstain, and they say there's absolutely no point for them because there's no way that they aren't voting against their interests. They've got two candidates in this supposedly two-party system, and they both don't give a shit about fucking poor people, so poor people don't give a fuck about them. Yeah, but okay, so it's the red states. I hated that term from the start, not least because when I see a country turning red on a map, I like that to be a good thing.
Of them that doesn't ultimately change the structure of the United States, but will make the folks that are feeling alienated, that are feeling angry, that are joining anti-government movements like QAnon, make them feel like they've been heard. Make them feel like they've been heard. And my prediction is that these laws that are on the books now that say you can't travel from state to state to get an abortion will not.
Just a fact check, there aren't any on the books yet that say that. Nonetheless, at least Planned Parenthood in one northwestern state, I believe Montana, reportedly stopped taking appointments for people, for out-of-state patients who were coming from states where there were abortion bans, on the off chance that it eventually gets banned, which is pretty fucking pathetic.
Stand. My feeling is that they will allow people to go to New York or go to Illinois or go to California to get abortions. And
because that's so fucking easy.
They won't be able to prosecute people coming back. I don't think that there's any grounds for them to be prosecuting people for getting abortions in other states. And on top...
well, there's no statutory grounds for them doing it yet. But the question is, do they enact laws that would make it possible? And if they do enact laws, will the courts uphold them? And on the one hand, you've got a Supreme Court that would just love to uphold something like that. On the other hand, that potentially opens up a bit of a minefield in terms of issues of interstate commerce and stuff like that. I mean, you could potentially open the door to California trying to, like, extend their consumer protection laws, which are better than much of the country, to out of state or some shit. So, I mean, there are lots of things. That would not be an easy one for them because there's just so much other stuff that could potentially, cause to come unhinged. But, yeah, I mean, maybe let's not just discount the possibility altogether.
top of that, it's important to point out that there will be a huge amount of effort on the part of Planned Parenthood and other foundations to enable women in those states to travel to other states to get abortions.
Yeah, that's not actually shaping up that way entirely.
You know, that because, and this is something that we do point out, right?
I mean, that's not to say that there aren't, like, people fundraising to enable people to travel. That's true. But Planned Parenthood has been, their response to all of this has been very mixed.
I am for abortion because I believe in women's rights, and I believe that the government does not have the right to step in and make a religious call like that.
Oh, okay. Oh, wow. Okay. Because one of the things that, if you weren't here last time, what you missed was his explanation for why he's pro-choice was just that the U.S. isn't a religious state, and he felt it was a religious call. And he spent like 10 minutes on this shit and never once mentioned bodily autonomy or anything about the person whose body the fetus is in. But he finally got round to it. Okay.
But Planned Parenthood and Margaret Sanger and a lot of the ultra-rich, they believe in abortion for very, very different reasons. I recall, you know, at one point in my youth, I was sitting in...
Okay, drinking game, if he says Malthusianism, drink.
In the living room. I can't get into the specifics of why I was there. I was sitting in the living room of one of the main funders of the Republican Party of Ohio.
He can't get into the specifics about why he was sitting in the living room of one of the main funders of the Republican Party of Ohio. Which, it's worth noting, Ohio has the distinction of having the most corrupt, the most thoroughly bent state legislature in the United States. I mean, right now, we have the biggest political corruption case in the history of the federal government investigating these things, around some energy company that was paying off all sorts of politicians. Yeah, so he just happened to be in the living room of one of the leading fundraisers of the Ohio Republican Party, and he won't say why. I'm sure there's no reason to think ill of him. I mean, it's not like this is the kind of guy who likes to hang out with fucking fascists or anything.
And they were also one of the main contributors to Planned Parenthood of Ohio. And their reason for it was they felt that poor people have too many children, there's too many people in the world, eco-Malthusian reasons. It wasn't because these were not feminists and radicals that were fighting for the rights of women. These were people who very much feel there are too many people in the world. And that, you know, while there is, you know, we both, you know, those of us who are pro-choice, we do want women...
Okay, granting that all that is true, and I have no reason to doubt any of what he just said, if you are donating to Planned Parenthood and at the same time donating to the political party that would criminalize what Planned Parenthood does, that does suggest a certain level of incoherence in your political thinking.
Women's rights to be protected. We should acknowledge that there are other forces that want abortion for different reasons, for very different reasons. But that said, those of us who are pro-choice, we now have the very, very difficult job of trying to explain to our pro-choice friends and our pro-choice co-workers and our pro-choice Marxists and socialists.
Okay, pausing. What does everybody think, chat, that he wants us to explain to our pro-choice friends and colleagues and whatever? What is he going to tell everybody to be explaining to people? Taking bets. What do you think this is going to be? I think he's going to explain why they shouldn't be focusing on this. That they really shouldn't, and that they certainly should not direct any anger towards people who want to criminalize basic reproductive health care in a way that will get large numbers of people killed and ruin huge numbers of people's lives. Yeah, because, and, I mean, just judging from stuff he's said on Twitter, That's what I think this is going to be. What do you all think? Something to do with eugenics? Okay. Any other thoughts, chat?
Why joining this liberal mobilization right now and screaming about civil war is not going to help.
Oh, wait a second. So, wait, that's who he thinks is screaming about civil war? Lee thinks liberals are the ones screaming about fucking civil war? Last I checked, it was fascists, the people with the guns who like can't stop talking about how they'd really like another civil war. And that's before we get into the fact that if you look at this you look at this situation in the U.S. from the angle of what's called low-intensity conflict, the death squad model, sort of like Ireland between 69 and 98, a lot of like Colombia now, Chile now, Central America at various times over the past half century. If you look at it from that model, we're already there. We've got state actors carrying out terror attacks again, we've got parastate actors, we've got these far-right paramilitary groups who are acting with the connivance of the police, and thus of the state, carrying out all sorts of terror and trying to do more of it. Well, I mean, the only thing we're missing actually is, paramilitaries on the other side. I mean, I haven't heard liberals screaming about civil war.
And that's going to be a very difficult thing to say, because people are going to be very emotional about this right now.
Yeah, I mean, it's almost like this is kind of a serious thing that is going to ruin a whole lot of people's lives, and something needs to be fucking done to put a stop to it before this is taken as an opportunity to see just how reactionary things can get. Yeah, I mean, it would be a hard sell to tell people not to do anything about that.
Now, and on top of that, the media is not trying to calm people down. The media is hyping all of this up. And it's going to be very difficult to do, and we should be careful about it. I urge people to be careful. Don't poo-poo, the things that people say. If someone says they're really triggered and they're upset about it, don't say, oh, it's not a big deal. Don't say anything that would sound like you're insensitive to what they're saying.
While at the same time very definitely being insensitive to what they're saying.
But with the more advanced elements, talk about what's going on, not in the Supreme Court, but in the country itself. About what's basically happening to the United States right now.
Okay. Well, first of all, I'd love to know what his advanced elements are. But, yeah, okay, so what's this going to be?
Rosa Luxemburg, who is one of the most important Marxist revolutionaries of the early 20th century, she wrote a very important pamphlet at the
Oh, here we are, the wonderful camera angle that they picked.
beginning of World War I, called the Junius pamphlet. And she didn't sign it because she wrote it, and she eventually went to prison for writing it, but she didn't sign it because she didn't want to go to jail. And so she wrote it as Junius. That's why it was called the Junius pamphlet. And it was a socialist pamphlet arguing against World War I. The German Social Democratic Party had said it would never support a war, and then they zigzagged and they ended up supporting the war anyway. But in the Junius pamphlet, she said something that I think is very important. I'm going to just read to you this paragraph that she wrote in the beginning.
I'm just going to pull this up, because I want to see what the context is. Is it weird? Okay. Trying to find it in the original. As being a translator, I don't like to rely on translated text if I can help it. But looks like that's going to be complicated. So, okay, here is the text as it appears on Marxist.org. Okay.
Beginning of the Junius pamphlet, when she was calling out the Social Democrats for supporting the war. She said, "Today we face the choice exactly as Frederick Engels foresaw it a generation ago.
Okay, not in chapter 2. Okay, just trying to find this chat. I guess it must be in the end. Hola de caridad, ¿cómo estáis? I'm not finding this line that that he's describing.
Either the triumph of imperialism and the collapse of all civilization, as in ancient Rome, depopulation, desolation, degeneration, a great cemetery, or the victory of socialism, and that means the conscious, active struggle of the international proletariat against imperialism and its methods of war. And this points to an ugly hidden truth. We try to be optimistic here. We always try to be very optimistic about everything. We want to make it sound like, we will win, and I believe we will win. Revolution is the main trend in the world today.
But it's funny, he says revolution is the main trend in the world today, but he's just explicitly against it. His thing, the CPI, is very much an electoral grift.
Historical inevitability is not something that we completely cling to these days. The Roman Empire was abominable and horrendous, but when it fell, it did not become replaced with something better. The fall of the Roman Empire did not result in a higher plane. It resulted in something worse. The life expectancy of human beings significantly decreased in Europe after the fall of the Roman Empire. The height of human beings decreased by inches, I believe, after the fall of the Roman Empire. And from what I understand, it took Europe 1,100 years to get back to the population after the fall, 1,100 years. And it's quite interesting because at the time the United States was being founded, one of the most popular books was Edward Gibbon's.
Okay, we almost got to the point about how communists respond. We spent like 2 seconds there. And now we're talking about how people after the Roman Empire were kind of short. I'm going to speed this up.
Rise and fall of the Roman Empire. As the founders of the United States were setting up the United States, they were studying this work of history that was so important. They were studying it page by page, trying to figure out how can we do something different. And that was around the time that Europe was starting to reach the population levels it had at the height of the Roman Empire. That's why so many towns in upstate New York have Roman or Greek names. That's why if you look at the capital, that's why they have the columns that look like Greece and Rome in the capital. It was because they were studying what went wrong. What went wrong with the Roman Empire? Why did the Roman Empire fall? And as we're starting to build a new civilization and we're
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't want to accuse somebody of that Snake Hunter Delta, but at times it really does kind of seem like that.
We're starting to study reason and we're questioning the old feudal order. How can we not make the mistakes the Roman Empire made? So it's important to understand that. But when the Roman Empire fell, it wasn't replaced by something better. We like Spartacus. We showed a clip from Spartacus earlier here. Spartacus leading the slaves of Rome to revolt was a great thing. And we like the Zealots and the Jews that fought for their independence against the Romans. And we like
Oh wow, we found some Jews he likes.
the various heroic movements of people in Africa and the Germans and others who fought for their independence. But the Roman Empire falling by itself did not necessarily lead to something better. And that imperialism is on a trajectory that could lead to something worse coming to replace it unless something better emerges. And that leads me to, I just recently started studying a very important book called, I believe it's called The Assault on Reason by Lukács, who was a Marxist philosopher. And he talked about the rise of philosophical irrationalism. A very important book. So if you go back to the time, it was the Spanish who got in on colonialism first. The Spanish were the colonizers, Christopher Columbus. And as they were going into Cuba and Mexico and South America and colonizing people, Spain still largely had a feudal economy at the time. And as they were colonizing and committing horrendous crimes.
Okay, I mean, is this what he's going to just... Is he coming back to the question of how communists respond to the abortion disaster ever? I'm going to skip ahead of it.
It says the last shall be first and the first shall be last. He's attacking Christianity not because he thinks it's irrational and not scientific, but because he sees it putting forward a message that ultimately would challenge imperialism. He celebrates what he calls the blonde beast, the white man who goes to Africa or Asia and sheds his moral Christian pretenses and goes back to a morality of might makes right. This is philosophical irrationalism, right? The belief that the strong should just ruthlessly rule over the weak. The belief that right and wrong are something made up to restrain the powerful. They're a con or a hustle. And this philosophical irrationalism that you can talk about Friedrich Nietzsche, and now I think Ayn Rand is definitely an expression of it. This is really the ideology of the ruling class of the United States. But it's not.
The thing is, okay, that's an interesting... I actually don't think that is the ideology of the ruling class of the U.S. If you look at the way when they talk amongst themselves in, say, in the publications that are specifically aimed at capitalists, not at people who have to, need to just be indoctrinated in order to have their consent manufactured in order to do whatever the hell capitalists need to be done, but actual people who are making investment decisions on the large scale and actually really, if they are not well informed, will fuck things up for capitalism generally. And if you look at that, and if you look at the way that often, particularly socioeconomic questions are posed, a lot of it reads, I mean, as Noam Chomsky also pointed out, vulgar Marxism. I mean, it's not particularly well developed, and it is not an analysis that is deployed for the purpose of actually overcoming capitalism. Of course not. But when they try to understand their position and the strategic needs of their position within society at a given time, they can't help but acknowledge that there is a fundamental conflict between them and all the people who work for them. So I don't know about this. I mean, this irrationalism thing.
It's not for everybody, right? I mean, they don't give it to everybody.
They certainly encourage it in others, but I don't know to the extent that we could actually say that they buy into it themselves.
But, it's not a coincidence that many Republicans, but also Stacey Abrams, say that Atlas Shrugged is their favorite book. It's not a coincidence at all. It's not a coincidence. And what Leo Strauss, the ideologue of the neocons, put forward was also a similar view, right? That morality, these things are a dangerous threat to the philosopher kings, the smart people who are meant to rule over the rest of us, and that any form of populism that would be kind of an effort, a mobilization of society to enforce some kind of moral code on the elites was a threat to freedom for the intellectuals, a threat to science, etc. That's what you get when you read the Philosophers and the Art of Writing by Leo Strauss, and that's what Leo.
And I mean, funnily enough, actually, a lot of that's particularly Kennedy liberalism was very big on this idea of, say, the paradox of grace. Obama also loved it. This idea that you can't escape the fact that what you do as a member of the ruling class is going to do horrible things to people. You even if you pretend to have the best of intentions. So you just gotta kind of shrug and say, okay, fuck it. It's going to, a lot of people are going to die from my decisions. And, kind of go along with that. And this idea that actually the decision making and the actual thinking should be very much limited to a sort of a vanguard of society, a liberal vanguard. I mean, that is certainly a very key aspect of, say, Kennedy liberalism. They were very explicit about it. I mean, if you read the op-eds at the time, the 1960s. I mean, it's just, this shit's full of it, and it's full of shit. But actually, when you look at Lenin, to a great extent, he was also very much on that page.
Leo Strauss taught his students, who eventually became the neoconservative wing of the Republican Party. And this is what the elites believe. And that's why ContraPoints in her video on envy, right, when she started talking about Christianity, she could have read Karl Kautsky and talked about Karl Kautsky's understanding of Christianity as the expression of the Roman proletariat, but she didn't. Instead, she focused on going over Friedrich Nietzsche's Beyond Good and Evil and highlighting this kind of worldview. It's a very anti-socialist worldview. And it's a
Wait, so she's talking about envy, and she decided to mention, some ideas about Nietzsche. I haven't seen this, and honestly, ContraPoints isn't exactly my favorite creator in general, but somehow I have a feeling that this is a total misrepresentation, because it usually is when it's Caleb Muppet.
Worldview that has nothing to do with that, but yet this prominent bread tuber decided to just preach philosophical irrationalism in her audience because that's what they believe. And it's a matter of emphasis. The left...
Okay. Has anyone actually seen this video that he's talking about? Because I have a feeling that that isn't actually what happened. Just call it statistically probable that that was just bullshit.
Focuses on social liberalism, the idea that you have no obligation to your community, you have no obligation to your family, you have no obligation to your country, live your life as you want, social liberalism, the individual's rights above all else. The right wing focuses on economic liberalism, right? The government has no right to tax people, the government has no right to regulate corporations, corporations should be able to do whatever they want and get the government off our backs. But this is really what they believe. It's liberalism, justified with philosophical irrationalism. Individualism above all else, collectivism is always dangerous, collectivism is always fascist. That's what they believe.
They, in this case, being the elites. He can't bring himself to say the capitalist class because he's kind of cool with a lot of the capitalist class. Yeah, I mean, my impression, Natalie always strikes me as fairly liberal, but I would be very surprised if her thing was exclusively just preaching Nietzscheism. That just does not sound right.
And this ideology is an ideology that leads to civilizations coming apart. Civilizations are held together by moral codes and beliefs and ideologies. That's why ideologies have always existed throughout human history. Wherever human beings have been existing,
that's very materialist of him there. That's wonderful materialism there. Very communist.
Moral codes to live by. They've written religions and ideologies, etc. This is what human beings need. I've often made the analogy that ideology is like when you're driving down the road. You know where you came from, you know where you're going, you know how you're getting there. But when you
and his is basically you don't know any of those things.
Strip society of ideology, and you say it's all just a matter of the weak versus the strong, and there is no real truth. That leads to a situation where, imagine you were driving down the road, and suddenly you didn't know where you were coming from, and you didn't know where you were going, you didn't know how you were getting there. You'd stop the car. Suddenly, you'd be, what am I doing? And that's what's happening all across the United States, because the roadmap that we were given to define U.S. society is coming apart. And
okay, which roadmap is that? He hasn't. Yeah, it's worth noting, since we did come in the middle. For anyone who wasn't here last week when we started on this little ride, he has not. This concept of there being a roadmap of U.S. society is not something that he has discussed previously here. So what he means by there being a roadmap that is now coming apart, he hasn't actually. This is. Maybe he's about to get into that, but he hasn't said anything about it before.
It's coming apart, and it's not being replaced with a new roadmap. We have an ideology. It's called Marxism-Leninism. We know where we came from. We know where we're going. Actually,
well, no. I mean, what you just sketched out was just straight up idealism.
One of the songs of the Chinese Revolution, the Lei Fong song, if you look at the lyrics, it translates to know where you came from and know where you are going. And that's one of the things. And, in China, they have ideology. Every Chinese student is given a red scarf on their first day of school and told that that's their little piece of the Chinese flag. And the red stands for the blood of all the people who have fought to make China what it is today.
But, I mean, see, the thing is, there isn't the idea that there is such a thing as being non-ideological. That is itself some liberal bullshit. You hear this all the time, there was, for a while, I haven't heard it as much in last few years, this idea, say that somebody's decision was ideological, and that meant that it was bad, somehow. As if the good decisions are not informed by any halfway organized idea of how the world works. Which, there isn't a lack of ideology in the U.S. There's a lack of belief in official ideology, which is good because official ideology sucks shit. And there is a lot of conflict of other ideologies and a lot of people trying to figure out exactly what their ideological position is because none of it, what they know, the main thing they know, is that things do not actually make a whole lot of sense from the perspective that they're constantly having hammered into them from, official regime propaganda. So it's not a lack of ideology. It is, if anything, a plethora of ideology that's going on in the U.S. right now.
And they are imbued with ideology. And it's that ideology that enables people to keep living, and enables people to keep believing, and enables people to go on and make sacrifices and be happy and optimistic about the next day. And as the ruling class is seeing its own ideology spread among U.S. society is coming apart. And part of that coming apart is the red states versus blue states divide, right? And we're going...
Which is, okay, here he comes back to some just straight up liberal bullshit. This divide does not exist. If you look at polling, what you find is, even amongst, first of all, people who actually will admit to supporting the Republicans are a minority, a very clear minority. The Republicans know it, which is why they're always into vote suppression. For another thing, you have all sorts of issues where, regardless of whatever party people feel, are identified with, they take a view on a whole wide variety of issues that is way to the left of the entire political class, like on healthcare, for example, like on, wars, for example, or how the economy should be organized, what the main moral issues of the day are. If you look at the serious polling information and you just, skip over the executive summary because that's just a waste of time, and just look at the questions, the answers, and the demographic breakdown of those answers, what you find is actually this divide doesn't exist. I mean, you find a lot of people who vote for Republicans and also think that actually there should be a national health service, because fucking obviously there should be, because everybody who's dealt with an insurance company for more than 5 minutes in this country knows that insurance companies are horrible and there has to be a better way of doing things.
Going to increasingly see, I believe, an effort by the global financial capitalists to break apart the United States, to balkanize the United States. They always accuse Russia and China of trying to balkanize the United States. They're the ones trying to balkanize the United States. Because if...
Wait, okay. We've gone from, we need to stop listening to the liberals who are screaming about civil war, which I haven't heard the liberals doing, but okay. And now we've gone to the global elites, triple brackets, are trying to balkanize the United States.
If this country were solid, and if the working people of this country loved each other and identified with each other and had some kind of national unity, they could block the austerity that they want to impose. They want to...
Okay, get rid of that dickhead. Oh, well, good night, Mask. Always lovely to see you. Adam says, yeah, people who call themselves Republicans are surprisingly populist. Yeah, I mean, you look at, actually, if you completely ignore party affiliation, and the thing is that there is so much bipartisan consensus, I mean, to the extent that you really cannot call this a two-party system, because just in terms of ideology and in terms of cooperation, it's one organization that just happens to have two names. But so many just basic, obvious improvements to people's lives are totally viewed as completely beyond the ideological spectrum, beyond, even being permissible thoughts, that they manage to sort of avoid being sort of marked in a partisan way. And so somebody can vote for Republican because, they're racist and they want to, and they're like really racist, so Democrats aren't racist enough for them. And at the same time think, our healthcare system sucks shit and maybe we should just be able to go to the doctor every once in a while instead of just hoping that reruns of ER feature the thing we've got.
To atomize the United States, to break it up into many different little communities, many different states that they can all conquer. When people are divided, they are weaker. When they're together...
Well, okay, what does he think? What, he thinks the capitalist class doesn't already control the United States? I mean, yeah, exactly. People who live in these red states or counties that went to Trump, there's a very good chance these are people who didn't vote, and didn't vote because they have absolutely no faith in the likelihood of any of these pricks ever doing anything that benefits them. I mean, that was why one of the most horrible things that of the Trump years on the liberal end of things was where you'd hear these things about, some like broke people in a county where the rich people voted for Trump, and most people just abstained because they're broke and none of the candidates showed any interest in them. And they'd be having, there'd be a story about them having some sort of health problem and they can't get health care or something like that, and fucking liberals would be like, yeah, serves them right. And it's like, fuck you. No, that doesn't. If that serves anyone right, it's insurance executives and the people who make policy on their behalf. Them, I would love to subject to the torture of trying to acquire health care if you can't pay for it in cash. But, I mean, this whole idea here that the global elite, the capitalist class, let's just call it the fucking capitalist class, though he means the Jews. He's made that very clear on many occasions. But, I mean, what fucking the capitalist class runs this fucking country. They don't need to take over the country. They've already got it. They've had it since the beginning. This country was founded by the capitalist class of their time. They don't need to balkanize the United States in order to take it over. They already fucking run it.
Together, they're stronger. And so playing up this red state versus blue state divide and intensifying that as a way to push forward their agenda of austerity, of making every state poorer, right? They see the United States, I've said this many times, the Atlanticists see the United States as New York City and Southern California, and a big gap between there. But our job is to see the United States instead as a country with 50...
Well, why don't we actually, instead of, looking at this in a nationalist way, we could just look at the working class, which is international. Pretty much everywhere you go, it is international. And globally speaking, it is very international. Although in most places you find it, it will be fucking international. And we could look at the fucking working class and not obsess over fucking nation states.
States in it, full of natural resources, full of people that want to go out and work, full of communities that are full of great potential. That's what our job to see the United States is. And that's why Stalin advised the Communist Party and William Z. Foster to move the headquarters of the Communist Party from New York City to Chicago, because they understood that if things...
Chicago is not what people are talking about when they're talking about flyover country.
Are going to change in the United States. It's not going to happen on the port on the one side or the port on the other. It's going to happen in the middle of the country. And so we have to communicate. And
also, the thing about the middle of the country is most of the people don't live there. In fact, I mean, if you see these maps, the ACLU puts them out when they're talking about the border zone and how all sorts of just basic human rights protections against, like, search and seizure and arbitrary detention and all sorts of shit are suspended in the border zone. What they point out is the overwhelming majority of the U.S. population lives within 100 miles of a land or sea border. Most people in this country live on the edge. I mean, there are as many people in LA County as there are in Southern California as there are in quite a few of those so-called flyover states. It's not like the majority of the population is there. I mean, that doesn't mean you should discount them, but to act as if that's the real America, or that all that bullshit, that's bullshit too. We're talking about a country where actually it's an extremely urbanized population, and he's sitting here talking about how that we should focus on the least populated areas, and I agree we should not ignore them, especially because pricks like this want to focus on them, and we can't allow that to go uncountered. Because, I mean, if they're the only people pretending to be leftist organizers in places like fucking Kansas or Wyoming or wherever, that's not a good thing. The fact that they're there is good enough reason that, actual communists should be paying attention to these areas to the extent that they're not already. And I think there's actually a lot more attention being paid to those areas by comrades than is often acknowledged, including comrades who are from these areas. Yeah, exactly. LA County has a huge number of people, way more than I think any of the rectangular states around fucking Idaho and Montana and Colorado. I mean, I think Colorado. I don't have the populations in front of me, but I mean, those are some of the most sparsely populated states in the country.
They're not simple ideas. These are complex ideas. We have to communicate to other people that in order to really push things forward, we need to be trying to bring red states and blue states together around an economic agenda that can make life better for all Americans. And that means getting Americans in red states and blue states to see what they have in common. It also means pushing back against free market ideas. It also means, means not buying into the demonization. And so if we go out, and I understand, I think there was some were there explosions? There was some violence that happened yesterday. I know this morning there were some people stripping naked in some churches and screaming. And these are things that are ultimately, at the end of the day, feeding the agenda.
Feeding what agenda? Okay, now, does anyone know what that? Okay, this was from the 1st of July. So, like, last day of June, is people stripping naked in churches? Anyone heard anything about that? I feel like that's something I would have heard something about, but I totally missed that there was a railway strike in the making. So, maybe not. But, okay. He's suggesting that people should not actually confront, say, these multi-billion-dollar fundamentalist propaganda outfits that are outright working to make everybody's life worse, and particularly to just impose a Christo-fascist theocracy on everybody to the extent that they're able. God.
This is feeding the agenda, and we have to be the ones to do the difficult thing because we're serious and tell people that feeding into this divide, as angry as we might be about it, feeding into this divide is not going to help bring the United States closer to socialism, and it's going to...
Well, see, and the thing about this divide, what he does not mention, he hasn't mentioned it once yet, is that actually this divide is not really a major thing. The majority of the population, the overwhelming majority, have long supported abortion rights. And again, that's another thing. Yeah, people who identify as, supporters of Republicans are less likely to than people who identify as supporters of Democrats and all that shit. But overall, there's a huge majority for abortion rights. This was an extremely unpopular decision. And so what he's saying is essentially, instead of, looking at what the working class is doing and joining in and trying to help them do it better, he's trying to cool down a struggle for something utterly essential in order to make it easier to organize with reactionaries. This guy is just a fucking toxic toad.
Embolden our enemies. And that's going to be a difficult task to do, but it's what we have to do. And it's going to be hard. And I would urge you to not throw your pearls before swine. Don't waste your time arguing with people that will never be convinced. Talk to the people that you think are more serious. That's my advice.
I see, and clearly, people who decided to take time out of their day to watch Caleb Muppet live are great judges of who is more serious.
And I just want to talk about how crazy these folks are. Now, Gavin, you're a beloved member of our organization. Stand up, please. This is Gavin Lockhart. You're like what is it? What's your position in Students and Youth for a New America? This is the Vice President of Students and Youth for a New America. His name's Gavin.
Students and Youth for a New America. This is right-wing, entryist bullshit.
Lockhart, and you are a Christian, and you disagree with me. You think that abortion, should be outlawed in line with your Christian beliefs. Is that fair?
Yeah.
Well, you're just...
Well, then fuck you, actually. Your beliefs... Look, if your beliefs go against abortion, then just don't fucking have one. Although I don't think that, this is just... So he wants to impose his beliefs on others, and Caleb Muppet's explaining how that's going to be cool.
Just as welcome in this organization, and I disagree with you, and you disagree with me, and you're welcome in this organization.
Yeah, because neither of you actually have any skin in this particular game. It's easy for you two to just kind of disagree, because you're both little reactionary ass blasts, and neither of you is ever going to be in the position of having an unwanted or potentially dangerous pregnancy that the law makes it impossible for you to do anything about. Neither of them is gonna go and have a methotrexate prescription for fucking rheumatoid arthritis down the road and have it denied because that's also an abortifacient and maybe they might get pregnant. Like, they have literally no skin in this game. So it's very easy for them to fucking disagree.
But my understanding is that you're not welcome in the Democratic Socialists of America.
Good! That's like the first good thing I've heard about the fucking fucking Democrat supporters of America in a very long time. He should be fucking unwelcome.
And that you didn't even go to their meetings and argue with them about this. You were just going to their meetings, just as a regular person. You were going to their meetings, stay where you are, and you were going to their meetings and arguing with them.
Stay where you are.
About this, and not arguing with them about this issue, not debating them and all that, just trying to support the Democratic Socialists of America. They discovered on your Facebook that you take this position, and based on that, they drove you out of Democratic Socialists of America.
Well, good, because there's really no space for that, and a reactionary, and he's clearly reactionary in other ways as well, if he's ended up with this asshole.
Now, folks, this is proof that Democratic Socialists of America is not serious about bringing socialism to the United States. Because if they can't stand to have one guy who loves their group and is one of the most loyal and dedicated activists that you could find.
Well, wait a second. I mean, he loves their group, but he clearly does not actually stand for what that group stands for. It is not exactly unheard of for a group to say, especially a political group, specifically a fucking political group, to say, these are our positions, and we're open to people who advocate for those positions and not against them. And this is a pretty basic thing, especially if you supposedly are interested in uplifting the working class, which, about half of which, a little bit more than half of which, is seriously harmed by the criminalization of abortion in this country. Then, yeah, I mean, he's just very much on the other side and he needs to fuck right off, or give some thought to the actual consequences of his actions, since he will not personally suffer them.
They can't stand to have him in their group. How are they going to recruit anybody in the red states? There's a huge
well, because a lot of the people in the red states actually disagree with this cunt.
Percentage of America that are opposed to abortion. And it shows they're not serious. They're just trying to be the foot soldiers of one wing of the ruling class to feed into the agenda that makes all Americans poorer.
Wait, so because they support the half of the working class, well, more than half of the working class, who are going to be seriously harmed by this decision, rather than some prick who has absolutely no skin in the game and thinks that because his personal religious beliefs say that he's against having abortion, something he's never going to have anyway, he's never going to need, that it should be banned for everybody else. Like, seriously, fuck this.
And they made a very stupid decision and cut themselves off from someone who's been very valuable, and we're really glad to have you in our organization. So glad to have you guys. So glad you're here.
Wow, this is a very white group I'm just noticing here. God, this is like... Yeah, I mean, you've got everything from mayonnaise to salad cream.
One of the things that the liberals don't seem to understand, and I tweeted out that though I'm pro-choice and in favor of gay marriage, that there are many people that are not for their own reasons, and they're still my comrades and I like them. And as I was...
Yes, which is fucked up. Because what you're saying is the people who are harmed by that are not your comrades and they can fuck off. And there are way more members of the working class who disagree with, who don't think that that's a good thing, that abortion rights have been taken away from millions of people, then think that it's a good thing. I mean, he's declaring neutrality in a situation... Oh, God, I can't even.
It was being canceled as it was being tweeted out 1,000 times. One thing that kept coming up, I kept seeing in the tweets, was, of course a white man would say that.
Well, yeah, that's something that you probably get a lot more often than you realize, Caleb, that you are like the poster child of, course, a white guy would say that.
And I thought, these people live under a rock. Go to, the big Palestine rallies that happen, and go walk through the Palestine rallies and poll the people that are marching for Palestine from Muslim communities in Minneapolis and Chicago and Bay Ridge, New York, and poll, Muslim...
Yeah, except here's the thing. Islam does not take the same view of abortion as Christianity does. Judaism doesn't either, you dickhead. Actually, Christianity... This is one of the various unique selling points of Christianity, that they have this vague and ridiculous idea that has no scientific foundation, of a thing called conception that is the beginning of life, which is not even something you can pinpoint biologically, because there are two major steps in initiating that process, and only the second one, implantation, actually means that a pregnancy is even going to ensue.
Communities in Texas that are marching for Palestine, ask them what they think about abortion. There was a young Muslim activist who spoke at our conference in Austin. He's from Texas, and you read his tweets. He is very opposed to abortion, and he is not a white man. He's of Pakistani heritage, and that's his feeling.
And honestly, he can shut the fuck up too.
Puerto Rican community, there's a strong feeling that abortion is problematic because they have the trauma in their history of having their tubes forcibly tied in order.
Well, see, here's the thing. It's like, and let me see. Okay, let's see. I have a feeling that there are also quite a few supporters of reproductive freedom in the Puerto Rican community. I've certainly not met anyone who wasn't one.
To prevent them from breeding. And there are many black people and black nationalists who can recall efforts to wipe them out. And
oh, well, because he absolutely loves Louis Farrakhan, and he rarely misses an opportunity to stand
said that abortion is wrong because they feel that the white people have been trying to exterminate them for so long. And sure, I would say the majority of conservatives that are against abortion in the United States are white, but liberals don't speak for all people of color.
Yeah, and liberals, it isn't just liberals who support fucking reproductive freedom. Jeez,
they really don't, and they certainly don't speak for all women. A very high percentage of women are against abortion. And
yeah, very high, but still in the minority.
And if we want to change the...
Cite a fucking number, Caleb. Cite the numbers. Let's see what your very high percentage looks like in actual numbers.
United States, we have to be able to relate to these folks, and we have to be able to say, look, we disagree with it, and I told you what I think about abortion, I'm not afraid of it, and I'm not going to suppress and prevent anyone else from saying what they think about it who might have the contrary view. But
yeah, except this is not the same thing, because it's a difference. See, just because I think that abortion should be free, safe, legal, on demand, without any fucking apologies, doesn't mean I want to force abortions on anybody. Whereas these people who say that abortion should be illegal want to force unwanted and dangerous pregnancies on millions of people. That's not the same thing. Those are not equivalent views.
But we can't have this attitude that this is the cutting edge, this is the battle, because if you reinforce this issue as being the
yeah, but it is the fucking battle. Because that battle has been imposed on us. Because large numbers of people are going to suffer and die and have their lives ruined because of this situation, and yes, we do have to defend ourselves against it. There may not be the battle that some people would choose, but it is the battle we've got. It is the war that has been declared on us, and he's here declaring neutrality in it.
Dividing line as being the battle. What you're doing is you're enabling the ruling class, both wings of it, to continue to carry out their agenda of austerity, of balkanizing the United States and impoverishing people. And this is...
okay, he keeps on, saying that if you organize around reproductive rights, that automatically means that you're somehow supporting austerity. And okay, it should be obvious why that's bullshit. But, because that's just not true. I mean, if you're arguing for free, safe, and legal abortion, free at the point of use, and available to anyone who needs it, then you're obviously arguing against so-called austerity. You're arguing for a public health care system that includes comprehensive reproductive health care. But there's another aspect of this. And the aspect of that is that you actually have to come to people with, if you're trying to attract people to a revolutionary movement, to revolutionary organizing, you have to come to people in the struggles that they're in. And the struggle that millions of people are in right now is what the fuck are we going to do where, our reproductive freedoms have been criminalized, and, we could potentially go to prison for having a fucking miscarriage, which is there have already been cases of people being arrested for that even before this disgusting ruling. Well, that's the struggle that they're in right now. And either we can either be useful to them in that struggle and then sort of also point out the systemic roots of this, the material roots of this, and how the only way we're truly going to win these things is if we overthrow the capitalist class and get rid of, and just, take over the means of our survival and reorganize society along decent lines in the form of communism. Or we can do what he's suggesting, which is to sort of stand there and act aloof and say, I could kind of see both sides of it. And then, fuck that. I mean, if you want to actually attract people who have not previously been exposed to revolutionary thought and revolutionary ideas, then you've got to meet them where they are. And where they are right now is absolutely pissed off and terrified at the portents of this decision. And you're not going to win anyone over to revolution by standing over on the side and saying, yeah, I don't particularly care, I don't want to offend right-wingers from, right-wing white supremacist assholes who are also very misogynist. You're not going to win over anyone to a revolutionary cause by, shitting all over their struggle when it is a legit struggle that absolutely has to be waged, that is going to affect millions of people's lives, and that is, again, something that's going to ruin a lot of lives. You can't do that if you're trying to win people over and get people interested in revolutionary organizing. Of course, that doesn't matter to Caleb Muppet because he's not interested in revolutionary organizing. There's nothing revolutionary about him. I mean, when you look at his actual proposals for how society should be organized, it's just piss-weak social democratic bullshit with some anti-Semitism thrown in. That's it. So he can afford to just be aloof to the real struggles of millions of working class people and sort of shit on them from the sidelines in fucking Kansas while he's dressed like fucking vice principal of some fucking J. Lincoln Rockwell Middle School or some shit. But we can't. We absolutely have to be engaging and doing so in a supportive way, which I don't think I have to actually explain to anyone in chat or probably to anyone watching this. Our best chance in a situation like this, where there is a real struggle going on that has some serious, large-scale mass participation from working class people, is to be there and help it win and introduce people to our ideas about how you win these things and provide, our material help, our solidarity, including things like helping with organizing, abortion pill distributions and helping people fund travel to, if they're in the states that criminalize having an unwanted pregnancy or a risk pregnancy or something like that. We need to be showing up and joining in this struggle and doing what we can to make it successful and to spread what we know about how to make these things successful, or there's no point in us. It's the same thing with COVID. This is the let it rip policy is a major attack on the working class. It's going to kill and debilitate millions. It's already killed 1.3 million people, most of whom could be alive today if just basic public health measures had been taken from the start. What the fuck are we, who are supposedly interested in fighting for the working class and helping the working class just take the shit over and abolish this capitalist system that exploits and oppresses us? What the fuck are we for if we're not doing that? But, of course, for Caleb Muppet, that's not something that's not a question that arises. He just wants to shit over every real struggle in order to move things in the direction of his bullshit struggles in favor of fascism and against the global elites, which he can't even bring himself to call the capitalist class because he knows perfectly well he's fine with most of the capitalist class. And with that, it is after 1 a.m., so we're wrapping up for tonight. Thank you, everybody who joined. I will be back tomorrow at 11:30 p.m. until 1 a.m., just as I was today. And I hope to see you all then. Have a very good night.